Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome, welcome. Just waiting for everyone to hop into the room, and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Hi, guys. In the meantime, chat us and let us know where you're at. I'm in Buffalo today, and Miss Anisha is in Toronto. So we're neighbors. We're nice and close. Love it, love it. Okay, all right. Well, welcome, guys. If you're new to our webinars, my name is Marissa, and I am the content marketing manager here at Kangaroo Time. We are very excited to have Anisha Angela with us today. This is her first webinar with us, so we are very excited. She's an author, an ECE coach, ECE specialist. She has over 14 years of experience, so she's going to have some really great content to share about having a better work-life balance. So before we get started, let me just share a little bit about Kangaroo Time and what we do. So we are a comprehensive software platform. We help center owners and directors like you guys better run your business. But our main goal really is to just help you succeed in any way we can. So that's why we like to provide as many helpful resources like these webinars. We're always creating new content on here and in our blog. Hi from Toronto, hi from Idaho, that's great. So I'll share the link to our blog if you'd like to check it out, just so you have some more access to our articles. And beyond that, we also host a conference every year. So this year we are hosting our conference in Buffalo, Bounce Conference. It's going to be 2 days of content from industry experts. We're very, very excited to have everyone come again. It's going to be great. I also have a code for you guys for $100 off, so you can save some money on a ticket. So that's the link to register and learn more about it. And then you can use the code KTBounce for $100 off. So we'd love to see you guys there. So check it out. Please come along. And then before we get started, you will receive certificates for this webinar. I'm going to send them to you guys tomorrow. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can put them in the chat, in the Q&A. We can't hear you. We can't see you. Your microphone and camera are off. And I do have one more resource to share before we get started. Anisha put together a workbook for you guys that you can download. If you didn't see our email yesterday, that's the link to download the workbook so that you can follow along and get the most out of the webinar. So be sure to do that. And without further ado, please welcome Anisha. She is an EC coach and expert. She has over 14 years of experience. She has a degree in early childhood education studies, and she has had many roles over the years in the early child care field. She's led programs, taught college programs, worked as a senior manager, overseeing 45 child care locations, and now she is also the CEO and founder of her own business, the Early Childhood Coach and Company. So she loves sharing her wealth of knowledge with everyone, and she's a great speaker. So we're very excited to have her. And today she's going to talk more about cultivating a better work-life balance as an ECE leader. So welcome, Anisha. We're excited to have you.
Hello, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with the Kangaroo Time crew. Definitely, if you haven't put your name and where you're at in the chat, please continue to do so. We're going to be utilizing the chat as much as possible today because that's going to be our interaction. That's going to be our place to have these conversations. There's going to be lots of opportunity for us to self-reflect and actually take some real great nuggets back to our roles. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and thank you for the lovely introduction. All right. Right, so let's get started. So we're going to be talking about work-life balance strategies for the busy ECE professional. And I love doing this session because there's a difference between work-life balance for any other industry than, being an early childhood leader. It's so much different. And I really put it in a pretty little package for you guys to be able to conquer and get to that balance. So I won't go through this introduction, but just know that I'm coming from a space as I'm an early childhood leader myself. I've worked in the field for several years, working directly in the classroom, working as a supervisor, as a director, as a senior operator, working in a corporate space. I've pretty much done it all. So know when I come with this information and these experiences and this research, it really comes from a place of not just me doing my own research or working with really great individuals. It's coming from a space where I've actually been there before, and this is what I've learned. So definitely know that. So just to kind of open things up, know that there are some spaces when learning with me. So I want everybody to know that this is a space for growth. We're coming to these sessions, and it's so great that we have these sessions to come online and be able to support one another through these professional learning opportunities. But this is a space for growth, space for learning, a space for safety and vulnerability. So this is a space where you can actually ask questions, self-reflect, get really deep in your self-reflection of where you are when it comes to creating balance in your life as a busy ECE professional, as well as building community. I think what's so great about platforms like this is that we're basically all over. As we can see in the chat, we've got people from Idaho, from Toronto, to Buffalo, to North Carolina. So really, we're creating a space of community of ECE professionals that are here to support one another. So I'm very thankful to be spending this time with you. So what will you actually get from this experience? Well, we're going to really define what work-life balance is in early learning roles. Really, work-life balance has become, such a trending topic, which I'm happy that it's actually coming to the forefront about balance and mental health and all of those aspects that are really key to our roles. But as it becomes a trending topic, we usually just stay very surface level with it. And we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of defining of what work-life balance looks like for us. We're also going to understand why it's important in our role to know more and do more within that, what it looks like in our role, because all of us here listening, work-life balance is going to look completely different to everybody because there's so many different components to all of our roles as leaders. So really getting into that and why it's important. Then we're also going to talk about those actionable steps and tips that we can actually create as of today to create more balance in our professional and our personal lives. I do want to say, please excuse the way I sound today. I'm sounding a little bit rough. Allergies are just kicking my behind today. Please write in the chat if allergies are killing you as well today. So please bear with me if I sound a little off. So things we will be doing. So we're going to be having a lot of self-reflection and chats and discussion. So as I mentioned, we're going to be utilizing this chat function because I really think it's so great for us to be able to connect and talk to one another in the chat box and be able to see what others are feeling, what they're thinking, what they're working on. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to chat in the discussion box there, and I'll be keeping everything together. Thank you. I'm happy that I sound fine. And everybody, yeah, so it's not just me. There's a lot of us struggling with allergies today. I don't know what's happening. I mentioned to Marissa that I think that the pollen is just getting big. I don't know what's happening, but something is going on, but I'm happy a lot of people are struggling, not happy that they're struggling, but I'm happy that I'm not alone. Also the workbook. So Marissa was kind enough to put the link in the chat. Please be sure to download that workbook. And what's really great about these workbooks, it's not just a pretty, workbook that goes and matches with the workshop, which it does. It's also really great to use for you to put your notes in, as well as be able to take what you've learned today and bring it back to your team. So for those that maybe work in a leadership team, you can bring all of this information, your notes, the self-reflection questions are also in the workbook for you to also, take it back to your team, have that conversation around balance, as well as not even just your management team, but also your classrooms, your educators that work directly in the classroom, because we'll actually learn throughout this session that work-life balance, though it starts with us as leaders, It really needs to trickle down right down to our staff so we cultivate a space of balance within our centers and within our programs, because that's what's going to make it more successful. So that's why the workbook is there, and I definitely encourage you guys to use it beyond just taking notes. Okay, so with every session, I love a great quote to start us in the right direction. So the quote that I have for today is, balance is not better time management, but better boundary management. Balance means making choices and enjoying those choices. Who can agree with this quote? It's not about, there's a little bit of time management to it, but really it's about boundary management and figuring out when is the right time for each component in our lives and finding what we enjoy doing in our time. But before we get started, answer this one question for me. Do you believe you deserve work-life balance? Let me know in the chat. Do you feel that you deserve work-life balance? Let me know in the chat. Give me a yes, give me I'm not sure if you don't think so. Absolutely, I love it. Great, seeing I do deserve, yes, yes, great. Yes, with 4 kids, yes, Anita, absolutely. Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing. This is great. So why did I start by asking this question? Well, really, as I've mentioned before, work-life balance has been one of those trending topics of discussion, especially in leadership. But very few of us leaders genuinely believe that we deserve it. And that's the first part of this whole process, is really understanding and getting down to the root that we actually deserve to find balance in our personal and professional life. Without that deep understanding first and that deep feeling that we do deserve it, we're not going to go very far with our actions and our action plans and our goals and all of that great stuff. So that's why I started off with that question first, for us to kind of set the tone to know that we deserve balance in our personal and professional life. So let's start with another self-reflective questions. So I have a little bit of a chart here. So it's 1, 2, and 3. And I want everybody in the chat to give me a 1, 2, or 3 if this sounds like you. So which best describes where you are when it comes to having work-life balance? So give me a 1 in the chat if you feel I 100% have accomplished having work-life balance. Give me a 2 in the chat if you feel I have a slight understanding of what work-life balance is, but I struggle with it and the implementation of day-to-day. Or give me a 3 in the chat if it is an SOS, help me, I do not know, I absolutely need help. All right, I'm seeing some 2s, I'm seeing some 3s, no shame there. And then some 3s, excellent, excellent. All right, 2.5. So we're leaning between the 2 and the 3. I feel that. I feel that. Depending on the day, Anita says, that is really, really, really good. It really does depend on the day for sure. Amazing, amazing. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Great. Oops. There we go. So what is most important is you are here ready to step in to be a more balanced leader. So no matter if you've placed yourself at a 1, a 2, or a 3, what's most important to get out of this is that you are ready to take a step towards being a more balanced leader, and also just genuinely understand that you deserve to feel like a balanced leader, and basically identifying what that looks like, which we're going to get into that right now. So what is work-life balance and what might it look like? So I've gotten a couple of definitions. If you've done workshops with me in the past, you know I'm all about a good definition. We need to get down to the root of what these words mean to be sure that we actually feel genuine connection to it. So Cambridge Dictionary defines work-life balance they define work-life balance as the amount of time spent doing a job as compared to the amount of time spent with your family and on things you enjoy. I also have Forbes that says and defines work-life balance is one of the most important components of a healthy work environment. So let's head to the chat again. Let's have some more conversations here. So envision yourself as the leader that has discovered true work-life balance. What does this version of you look like? Let me know in the chat. Envision yourself. You've discovered what work-life balance is for you. It makes sense. You know, the light bulb goes off by the end of this session and you've created the best work-life balance. What does that version of you look like? Let me know in the chat. I'll give a couple minutes for those to type. I see Anita said, does it count as work if you enjoy it? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. I love that. I see Nikki says, less stress, more relaxed, better rested. Amazing, amazing. I see Vanessa says, being able to not feel overwhelmed. Absolutely. I see Elena. Oh, hello, Elena. I do know you. Leave at the end of the day and not work from home. Yes, not bring work home. Absolutely. Anita says, having systems in place where I can go about my day and having my business operate like an operating machine. Absolutely. I love that. I see Marie says, better sleep, fewer stress thoughts. Yes. Alexandra says all of the above. Absolutely. Sleeping better. Yes, Norma. A lot of us, and what we'll be talking about a little bit too, is what the unbalanced version of us looks like and what it looks like when we're tapping into possible burnout. It really looks different on everybody else, right? And that might look like not getting a good night's sleep anymore. Maybe you're leaving work and you're coming right back home and thinking about work. It really doesn't stop, right? So I think what's really important about this question is really envisioning what the balanced leader looks like within yourself so that we can create and maintain some goals towards that and some action plans towards that. I see Shanta says, well organized, feeling less stress. Absolutely, absolutely. I want you to be sure that you capture in your mind that balanced leader that you've just described in the chat, and that's going to be your new goal. So why focus on maintaining or creating work-life balance? Why is this even important for us to really talk about? Creating balance has many benefits. Without an idea of balance in our lives, we are more prone to experience burnout in our personal and our professional lives. As much as we try really hard to have a separate personal and professional life, really when we're tapping into burnout and starting to feel the symptoms, I know most of us have probably been through burnout. I know I've been through burnout so many times. It really starts to fuse into one. So if you're feeling burnt out when it comes to your professional life, what happens? It starts to seep into your personal life. You start to feel a little bit shorter, you know, to your family, to your children. You're starting to feel like this 8 hours of sleep is just not enough anymore. So you're coming back to work and you're feeling extremely exhausted, which might make you feeling irritable at work. So really, as much as we try to create separation between personal and professional lives, really when we're tapping into burnout and not feeling balanced, they really fuse into one, which creates a lose-lose situation for us. So let's look at some stats. Again, I'm about research, I'm about stats to give you the information and the facts about it. So let's take a look at some of them. So 77% of employees have experienced burnout at least once in their current jobs. This is from CIPRA Career Expert. That's a huge number, 77%. Then we have another note and stat here is an unhealthy work-life balance also affects your mental health. More than 2/3 of employees have had their sleep negatively affected by issues in the workplace. And what I find that is so interesting, and the reason why I absolutely love, having the chat box open, is look how many people already, they said sleep better, getting a good night's rest already, and as they envisioned the balanced version of themselves. So this stat and this note here from Mental Health America really outlined exactly what we're saying. A lot of people, their sleep gets negatively affected from issues in the workplace. We also have here 7 in 10 of these adults claimed workplace stress impacted their personal relationships, especially with their spouses. How many people can relate to that, and put that in the chat if you feel comfortable? And this is why I mentioned that I know sometimes in our professional careers, we like to say, you know, there has to be a separation between the two, which it definitely needs to be. But when we're dealing with burnt out and feeling excessive stress, they really fuse into one. And this is where we have to really create action plans and goals around it. Then I have here 60% of leaders reported they feel used up at the end of their workday, which is a strong indicator of burnout. This is from Forbes. How many people have felt this one? You feel almost used up, right, by the end of your workday. And for most of us, the end of the day doesn't stop when we clock out at work. It continues on. If we've got, you know, a family, we've got kids, maybe we've got a second job, we've got school. So many people are, you know, continuing education. So it really doesn't stop at that time. So what's really happening is we're going beyond how we feel at this point. Then I have a quote, a stat here that says 66% of professionals say they often skip at least one meal a day due to stress and business over a workload. How many people can relate to this one? How many of us have said, you know, all of our staff out to go have lunch? We'll grab something to eat after work. I'll be fine. I'm not hungry right now. I've got a whole list of emails. What's lunch? I see Justin says, what's lunch? Yes, when is the last time that we've actually taken a lunch break and shut down our computers and walk away? You know what I mean? My fridge is empty at home. That's what it is, right? So many of us can relate to at least, you know, not even taking our lunch breaks. And we've really gotten to this go, 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 as Mary says perfectly, lifestyle when it comes to stepping into leadership. And it's really not practicing, you know, being a good, having good balance in what we do. And really, it also doesn't set the tone for our staff as well. That's also something I like to remind leaders. If we're not cultivating a space of balance for ourselves, how do we expect our team to also do that? Because I know all of us want our teams to also feel balanced in their professional and personal lives. How do we do that if we're not doing that for ourselves? So this is a huge statistic here, that 66%. So tell me in the chat, what do you think these stats and facts tell us? What does it tell us? We have normalized burnout. Oh, hello, Jamelia. Yes, we've normalized burnout. How many of us feel that one line? I think that that is like the perfect line. We've really normalized burnout, especially in leadership. And I think it's so interesting and it's hard, and I really love having this conversation and being able for us to reflect and not to make anybody feel bad, because I know a lot of us can actually relate to a lot of the statistics. So the goal is to kind of uncover the veil of what's really happening, but really we've normalized burnout. And I think just an additive to that as well, we're coming from a field where we give, right? We're expected to serve. We're serving the families, the children, our staff, you know, add another layer to that. We're working in the offices and we're in leadership roles. We're serving the staff, we're serving the community. There's so many areas we're pouring into. But what happens when we're pouring into nothing? We have nothing in our vases, in our glasses to pour. At some point, we're going to start breaking the glass and start giving people pieces of glass because we have nothing else to pour. So I think it's something really, really great for us to self-reflect on the fact that we come from a field and a role where we're supposed to give, but it's not going to make sense if we're not going to pour back into ourselves. So something I wanted to share, and the reason why I love to emphasize burnout is because I think a lot of the times I've done some coaching with leaders. I've done, you know, I've been in leadership myself. I've been burnt out in leadership quite a few times. And I think the common thing that I notice with leaders and within myself is sometimes we don't understand what burnout looks like within ourselves. I mentioned that earlier in this workshop. And I think that's one of the key reasons why we're normalizing burnout, is because we actually don't know what burnout looks like within us. So something I've learned is like somebody that's feeling burnt out, or they've reached burnout in the time of their career, they will look at somebody else that's burnt out and say, oh, I actually don't look like that. So I must not be burnt out. But understanding that burnout might actually look different in everyone else. I know for myself, when I'm getting to that point where I'm getting burnt out, I get a little irritable. 8 hours of sleep is just not enough anymore, but that might be different on somebody else. So what's really, really key is for us to really take a deep dive in what burnout looks like within us. But Herbert and Gail North put together these 12 stages of burnout, and I'm actually going to go through it for us to kind of take a look and self-reflect on. And I think it's really great for us to take a look at that, not only for ourselves, but also identifying burnout in our teams, because that's also a part of our role. But the 12 stages are here. So the first part of the stage is the compulsion to prove oneself. So feeling like you constantly have to demonstrate your worth. Then we have working harder. You become almost like a work addict. How many people feel that in our leadership roles, where you feel like the work doesn't stop and you just have to keep going, right? Then we have neglecting needs. So we're not sleeping or eating well, lack of social interaction. Then we have displacement of conflicts, blaming others or your situation for all your problems, including your stress level. We have a revision of values. Your friends and families are no longer as important as your work. Then we have denial of emerging problems. So intolerance, perceiving others at work as lazy, demanding, or undisciplined. Then we have withdrawal. So avoiding or dreading social interaction. We also have odd behavioral changes. So changes in behavior such as impatience, aggression, and snapping at friends and family. Then we have depersonalization. So you're feeling detached. Neither yourself nor others are valuable. And I feel like for the depersonalization, we can even have here, we start to question our why in the field. Why did we choose to be here? Why it's a lot happening. Why are we choosing leadership? I feel like it's too much. You start to have those inner dialogue and conversations with yourself. You're starting to feel inner emptiness, so feeling empty inside. You might also be feeling a bit of depression, so feeling lost and unsure, exhausted, feels bleak and dark. And then we're heading into burnout syndrome, when you can include total mental and physical collapse and time for full medical attention. So that's the very, very last point. So I'd love to know in the chat, can anybody relate to any of these stages of burnout that they have ever felt or currently feeling, or maybe they've seen somebody else go through this? I'd love to know in the chat. Again, this is a safe space for everybody. Neglecting needs. Okay, I'm seeing revision of values. Yes, absolutely. You're starting to question, right? And I do a similar workshop for classroom educators and for ECEs that work specifically in the classroom. And that's actually one of the biggest indicators of burnout, where they're starting to question their why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing. And that's huge, because our why is what carries us through to the very end in our career, right? So addressing burnout is really, really great. Went through almost all of the signs of burnout. Absolutely. Me too as well. Neglecting needs, getting snappy, which is embarrassing for someone in a caring. Yes, absolutely. And I love this conversation, because I think it's at a time where we need to normalize these stages, these feelings, so that we can overcome them and move into the right direction. I think what's also really key, as I've mentioned before, identifying what burnout looks like within you. So then you can actually take the steps towards taking yourself out of burnout or getting help if that's the next stage for you. So another question I have for the chat is, what are the most significant barriers to work-life balance in the workplace for you? So thinking out loud right now, and you can use the chat to me, thinking about the barriers. So it's great for us to identify what burnout looks like within us, but it's also really, really great and healthy for us to identify what barriers might be in our way currently. Because when we identify what burnout looks like for us and wanting to get balance, and then we understand what's in our way, we can create an action plan and goals to kind of overcome those hurdles. So right now, looking at everything that you're doing right now, what are some of the most significant barriers to work-life balance in the workplace for you? I'd love to know. All right. So management, not understanding burnout, absolutely. Guilt, we're going to be talking about that, Jessica. Thank you for mentioning that. There's so much to be done, and feeling like I'm not doing enough and I'm not at max capacity. Yes, and most of the time, us leaders are at our max capacity. We are beyond our max, but we still feel like we're not doing everything. Thank you, Jessica. Staffing, absolutely, and that is worldwide. Lack of support, small centers, a leader may be alone in the office, absolutely. People relying on you so much, absolutely. These are great, Thank you for sharing. I'm seeing the kids and their trauma dump on us because they feel safe, but then I can't let it go when I go home. Yes. Setting and resetting the bar high at yearly reviews and for CPL, yes. And not able to delegate work as not other support is available. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so continuation of that. I've had a couple of barriers, and actually some of them you've pretty much mentioned in the chat. They did a survey, I believe it was Forbes, to kind of take a look at what are some of the barriers of creating work-life balance. And these were the stats. We have 13.2% are bosses and supervisors. So a lot of people actually mention that their managers or those that work above them are some of the reasons why they feel as if there's a barrier towards work-life balance. Then we have 13.8 is the workload. So again, with being a supervisor or a leader in a center or a program, you don't just have the daily work and the daily operations. You have admin, you have licensing, you have so many other parts to it. Then we have the last three are the highest percentage. So that 16% is burnout. So again, we spoke about all of the things of what burnout may look like, what it may feel like, and all of those aspects. And burnout is 16%. We have 24.2% is company culture. A lot of us can relate to this. We don't develop and we cannot cultivate a space of work-life balance if the company culture has a direct opposite outlook on it. And then we have 32.8%, the highest is personal perfectionism. How many people can relate to that? Give me a yes in the chat. Personal perfectionism. And I think the person that wrote this was Jessica in the chat. 100% right on. That was number one, because we feel as if it's never enough. It is never enough because we always want to make sure the children are happy, the families are happy, the staff are happy, the people coming in to support us are happy. There's so many people, and we place this high emphasis of personal perfection on ourselves. All right, seeing some yeses in the comments. So key factors of achieving work-life balance. So I'm going to alarm a couple people here, but it's less about balance and more about finding a seamless middle ground between your professional and personal life. Okay. It's more about a balance of time and priorities rather than work and life. So really, we're moving away from work-life balance being a 50-50% kind of look. 50% this and 50% that. Let's be real. The world changes, our lives changes, the children's lives changes, so many things come up to play. So by having this 50-50 look at balance is really putting us at a hindrance with this. And really what it's about prioritizing things as well as finding a seamless middle ground between professional and our personal lives. I think also to add on that note as well is I think that's what makes us feel as if we're on this hamster wheel of finding balance, is because we're really viewing it as 50 and 50%. But really, that's not what it's about. It's about creating a seamless middle ground between our personal and professional life. All right, so some tips to get us started. So I've got some tips. If you don't have a pen and paper with you, please do, because I'm going to give you some awesome tips. So the first tip I have for you is establish boundaries. I know a lot of people in the very beginning, when I mentioned this, they said yes to this, because that's what it's about. It's about establishing boundaries for yourself, establishing boundaries for others. So if you're going to, for instance, for those that have said they never take a lunch break, it's about turning your computer off and letting your team know, at this time, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. I'm going to sit in my car. It's about establishing those boundaries. And I think that's where we're going to be talking about challenging the guilt a little bit, but that's where the guilt kind of comes in as well, because we almost feel like we don't deserve those boundaries. And I want to say this now so everybody can hear, as leaders, we deserve to have balance, and that starts with establishing boundaries. Next is take time off and vacation. No time off on a leash. So I know a lot of people needed to hear that, and a lot of people may have chuckled a little bit when I said no time off on a leash. What that is, for those that might not know, that's when we take a vacation and maybe we're on the beaches of Mexico and we're checking our emails to see, what child didn't come in for today. It's time for us to go back into taking true time off. And if we're going to take a vacation, actually take that vacation. And I think having an outlook of taking time off to pour back into yourself so that you can continue to give to others. I think if we reset our mindset to stop thinking of taking time off and taking time for ourselves as a selfish way, to thinking as, I can't give to others if I have nothing else to give. So thinking in that aspect. That's so funny. All right, tip number 3, delegation. For my leaders, it's about that delegation. It's about looking at those on your team. A lot of us have leadership teams. We have an assistant supervisor. We have a lead educator. Why are we not delegating a lot of these tasks to them? We feel as if it can be done in a certain way, or it needs to be done in a certain way. But delegation is really the hindrance of our balance, of creating balance. If you're filling your cup with all of these expectations and you cannot meet them, that's where we get into stages of burnout. So delegation is a huge part of that. And in terms of an extension of delegation, when I said the word delegation, it doesn't seem doable, there's 2 things you need to implement. And I call them the 2 T's, either trust or train. If somebody is on your team, maybe an assistant supervisor or somebody that you work with, and you need to delegate things, and for some reason, when I said this, it made you feel a little bit off or a little bit uncomfortable, maybe it's a trust factor. So maybe you need to work on your trust and being able to trust that your team can actually do a great job. Sometimes we actually underestimate the power of our team and underestimate how much that they can do in a specific role. So it could be a trust. And if for some reason you feel, okay, it's not really a trust because I trust them, maybe it's a train. What that means is maybe there's further training to be able to happen so that you can trust them. That's usually what the indicators is, either a trust factor or a train factor. So we're actually going back into training. Why can't we trust this particular individual to take on this role? This means we have to further train them so that they can get to that point where they can take over and be delegated these specific roles. Tip number 5, organization is sometimes the culprit. So when I say organization, it could mean many things. It could be organization in terms of your organization. So maybe looking into how you manage your time, looking into using all the tools and all the aspects that are happening. So I'm a Google Calendars kind of girl. If it's not in my calendar, it's not going to get done. But Google Calendars is also really great because you can visualize everything you have to do for the day. Sometimes you can even put personal things in there as well. So you can time block. So for instance, if I know I want to take a lunch at whatever the case may be, or I'm leaving at 3 o'clock, I'm going to time block 3 o'clock so no one can book a meeting for me during that time. So maybe it's a visual thing. Or organization could be the organization, the business. Maybe the culprit is the business, and we have to start creating a space of work-life balance where everybody is practicing work-life balance within themselves and cultivating that balanced space. Tip number 6 is redefine rest. So a lot of us have defined rest in a way that's not actually rest. So a lot of us say, like, you know what, I'm going to, sit in my office and eat my lunch today. And that's rest for me. I'm not going to take the day off tomorrow. So we are redefining what rest is when we really need to go back to the true root meaning of what rest is for us. So redefining what that looks like in our roles. Be intentional with breaks. So for a lot of us, I saw somebody in the chat that says, what is a lunch? So being intentional with our breaks. So whether it's a break in the day where you're going to grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath outside, take a walk, be intentional when you take your breaks. Because I know a lot of us leaders, we are always telling our staff, go take your break. It's okay, go take your break. But we need to be doing the same thing for ourselves and be really intentional with our breaks. Tip number 8 is know the pre-symptoms. So I said pre-symptoms, not just the symptoms, but before the symptoms, and signs of burnout within ourselves. So as I mentioned, identifying what burnout looks like within us. I said for myself, I start to get a little bit irritable. I'm always tired at the time. So once you start to establish what those symptoms are before you get to burnout, that's what's going to be the key to be sure that you don't get down to burnout syndrome. So really taking the time to self-reflect and know the signs within yourself. And then not only just know the signs within yourself, but taking action when you start to see those signs is really important as well. And an important aspect of that is making sure you're taking those actions. Tip number 9 is create an environment of work-life balance within your team. So this one is so key. And this is why in the beginning I had mentioned, take this workbook, share it with your team, share it with your colleagues and all of those aspects, because really cultivating work-life balance and creating balance for yourself in your professional career has to be a group approach. Because if you're working on work-life balance, feeling great with your work-life balance, but then your team doesn't know what work-life balance is, what's going to happen? They're going to come to you during your work-life balance and bring you down. So really it's about creating a community where everybody feels and they work on their own work-life balance so that you're cultivating a space of that. So like, for instance, I had worked with a supervisor through coaching. One of the work-life balance tips that she had worked on is letting her team know Friday at 5 p.m., no more text messages. She's done for the day. And she's done that for herself, which is really, really great. But what happens, because she hasn't cultivated a space in her program where her team also follows her boundaries, but at the same time has those boundaries for themselves, guess what happens? They send her text messages of things after 5 o'clock, and they're not important. It could be like a receipt for a toy that they bought or a great book they saw. And because she spent so much time just working on it within herself and not within the team, it really doesn't make any sense, right? So really creating a space where everybody is involved in creating those boundaries and balance within the team. Tip number 10, challenge the guilt. How many people saw in the chat when somebody had mentioned the guilt and absolutely agreed with that 100%? And we really get to this point where we feel guilty about wanting to have these boundaries and doing these things for ourselves, because deep down we actually feel that we A, don't deserve it, and B, there's something about doing something for ourselves that we feel we aren't supposed to do that. So I'm here to tell you, Yes. And I think the other perspective, as I've mentioned before, that's really great for us to consider is you cannot pour into others if you have nothing to pour. So if you pour back into yourself, you're feeling good, you're feeling energized, you're feeling back to your normal 100% self. Guess what you can do? You can work 10 times harder, you can serve 10 times harder, and you can support 10 times harder. But that can only happen if you pour back into yourself. So I definitely tell everybody to lean in and challenge the guilt. Tip number 11, know what makes you feel joy and stress relieved. So tap into your joys. How many of us have lost, our way when it comes to the simple things in life and what we enjoy, right? I remember before stepping into what I'm doing now, someone had asked me, what are your hobbies? And I actually laughed because I didn't feel like I had any hobbies because my work had taken over so much of my life that I couldn't even remember what a hobby was of mine, right? And that will happen, right? Because sometimes we mix in our professional life with our personal life, and then we consume ourselves with our professional lives that we forget our joys. We forget those things that we enjoy doing, whether you are a walk in the park kind of person or you're a, go to the park with your children. We lose those simple joys. So it's also about reconnecting with what makes you feel joy and feel stress relieved. And that's really, really key for us to know what that is. Tip number 12. Resist the need for perfectionism. It's not attainable. So for those that needed to hear this and saw that stat that we shared earlier, that the biggest reason and the biggest barrier to work-life balance was perfectionism, I'm going to tell you there's no such thing, so we're attaining nothing because it's not attainable to be perfect. So definitely, I hope that that gives everybody a little bit of a stress relief, because perfection, nobody's expecting us to be the perfect leader. There's no such thing. I think the leaders that we're looking for in these roles are a leader that is vulnerable, that has great communication skills, that are taking care of themselves and look out for their staff. That's the type of leader we're looking for. We're not looking for the perfect leader because it is not attainable. Tip number 13, build an environment that promotes work-life balance, but it starts with you. So as I mentioned before, it's similar to the other tip I had said before. It's a community and it's a collaborative effort in your workspace that needs to happen to be able to move towards work-life balance for yourself. But it starts with you. You cannot have an expectation of your team jumping into work-life balance and taking time off appropriately and not answering after 5 p.m. or whatever the case may be in terms of policies that you have if you're doing the exact opposite. So you have to lead by example. I see Alexandra says here, I started with a 6 p.m. within the right to disconnect policy. If staff are not calling in sick, I will respond or speak with them at the next workday. And that's what it is. It's putting in, if you have to put it behind a policy or whatever whatever you need to do, creating those boundaries are key, but it starts with you. And not only just putting these things into place, but following them. Because that was another thing I had worked on with that supervisor as well, is that she had all the rules and had all the tools and all the boundaries, but she wasn't consistent with them. So what will happen is she will have a boundary similar to what Alexandra wrote, where it's after 6 p.m., that's it. But then she was still responding. And what does that tell the staff? That tells them that that policy is actually not really real. So really sticking to what that is key, but it starts with you. Tip 14, rediscover and reconnect with your passions. So taking the time to tap into what your why is, what makes you passionate, what makes you feel great. Tap into that and rediscover it. And if you needed that reminder, I'm giving you that reminder today to rediscover your passions. Tip 15, advocate for organization and business restructuring to support work-life balance when possible. So I know a couple of people had mentioned in the comments that they either have managers or superiors that may not have that work-life balance to themselves. So then it gets brought down to you. Then when it gets brought down to you, it gets brought down to your staff. But you actually have the power to start change. And I want us to restructure our mind to think that we have the voice and power for change. So if we're in one of those middle positions where above us, they may not have that work-life balance, it's time to be an advocate and use our voice. right? And really sharing the benefits of what having a space of work-life balance looks like, and kind of sharing. You can feel free to use the information in this workbook where I have those stats and research. If you've got, those above you that loves to see the stats and research behind things, feel free to take those and use that in your chat. But trying your best to be a voice and advocate to restructuring the work culture to support work-life balance is absolutely key. And just knowing the benefits of what will happen when we do that. We're going to see less, calling in sick from staff. We're going to see less turnover. We're going to see less, all of these impacts that will happen when we start cultivating a space of work-life balance. So being able to be the voice and restructuring to support work-life balance when possible. Getting professional help is always an option, and a great one at that. So I am a big advocate for mental health, all things mental health and well-being. And if you are going through burnout and you're getting to the point of burnout syndrome, getting professional help is always an option and always available. Having somebody that you can just talk out some things that are happening. You can create some goals and action plans with, whether that is a mental health professional, a therapist, or it's a coach, whatever it is for you to get professional help to support you is always a great option. And really just, I like to put that in there as a tip so people know that you are not alone. You're not going to go through this alone. There are resources to support you along the way. Tip number 17 is let go of the 50-50 look of work-life balance. It's finding a number that creates balance for you in your role in your life. So again, us getting off of that hamster wheel approach when it comes to work-life balance. It's not 50-50. As I mentioned, life changes, our priorities change, our roles shift. Sometimes it's 40% of professional, but then the remainder is personal. And making those shifts and balancing that out is very, very key. And understanding that as long as the whole picture is 100%, that's what's key. But really that 50-50 approach isn't attainable, and we shouldn't be working towards that because life changes. And I think the more that we move towards how life changes, we'll be able to tap into that growth mindset of how things are moving and stuff like that as well, to create that version of balance for us, and knowing that balance looks different on anybody else. So it might be 30% personal and the remaining in professional, but that's going to change, and just identifying that within yourself and knowing that that changes. Tip number 18, understand that work-life balance changes, as I just said, with life changes, and make adjustments as it comes. So continue to reevaluate how life is. I think taking a self-reflective moment on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, and just saying to myself, what are the pressing things that I need to work on and professionally and personally, and prioritizing that and re-looking at that and readjusting it. As I mentioned, life changes. And I think if we have that approach to things, it'll make things a whole lot easier, because if we're using the formula of, it's always professional and then our personal life is building up, what's going to happen? We're going to feel like we're failing, right? So we have to kind of take a look and make adjustments as they come. Tip number 19 is defining balance for yourself. Understand what balance looks like within yourself. 20 is understand that work-life balance is about finding meaning and purpose, both in your work and life. So really understanding what is the purpose behind what you do in your work life, and what is the meaning and purpose behind your life. What are the biggest entities and the biggest components, and really understanding and finding that meaning of purpose. Tip number 21 is know and understand what is in your control and what isn't. I know a lot of people needed to hear that one. Sometimes some things are just out of our control and there's nothing we can do about it, and that is okay. The world is just asking us to do our best, and that's all we are expected to do, and that's all you need to do as a leader. So curious to know, what tip resonated with you most, if there was one? I know there was a lot. Let me know in the chat. Is there a tip that resonated with you most? I know that there was a lot there. I think the 50-50 approach is the main important one. I'll give a minute to see if anybody wants to say. I see Alexandra says number 10. Wonderful. Knowing what to change and what I cannot change. Yes. Identifying how burnout presents itself individually. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. You can go ahead and keep sharing in the chat. So I'm just going to introduce one last component of this workshop, and that is introducing balance. So we're redefining what balance looks like. We're understanding what burnout looks like in us, but we're going to redefine balance to give you the exact steps for how to create balance in our lives. So this is basically what balance means and what we're redefining. I'm going to go through each of these. So the B in balance is boundaries. So healthy boundaries are essential. Saying no and empowering others to have boundaries as well. So boundaries is the first part of balance. I'm going to skip this question, move on. So A in balance is take action on your plan to create work-life balance and create goals and revisit those goals. So as I mentioned, it's an ongoing process. Be sure you're creating goals and revisiting these goals often for yourselves. The L in balance is know your limits. Always know what your limit is. A is accountability. Hold yourself accountable and grab an accountability partner. If you have another supervisor or another leader that you know and you're working on work-life balance, help each other out. You need somebody to hold you accountable. So for instance, if you're saying, you know what, I'm going to take a vacation, I'm going to be off on Friday, and then you send somebody an email, get that person to say, hey, don't email me, you're off. So having somebody to hold you accountable is really, really key in holding yourself accountable. But that's a big part of creating balance is accountability. The N is find new ways to find balance in your life. So as I mentioned, life changes, life shifts, things move, life changes and all of that stuff. So finding new ways is always key. C is connect and communicate. Connect with other leaders and professionals to get ideas of work-life balance as a leader, as well as communicate with others on what's working and what's not. So again, connecting, getting with other leaders and other supervisors and those to kind of have conversations around what work-life balance is, you know, have conversations about what works for them, what hasn't been working for them, and all of that great stuff. And then also communicate to others when things are not working for you or when things are working. And then E is evaluate. Consistently evaluate how things are in your life, both personal and professional. Evaluate what has worked and what needs to change, and then reflect, refine, and repeat. So you're reflecting on what works and what goals you have in place, what action plans you have in place. You're refining them, making them better, making sure that it matches your life changes, your business changes, your role changes, and then repeat. And I think what's really key for us to know is work-life balance is more of a cycle. It's not an achievement. So really, I think another part of why we struggle with work-life balance is we think it's a destination. We get to work-life balance, hands are clean, we're good to go. But as I mentioned, life develops, life changes, our roles change, people quit and change all of these aspects for us and all of that stuff. So it's a cycle. So really by reframing our mind to think that work-life balance is not a destination, it's going to be an ever-changing thing. It's not an overall achievement. It really takes us working in on that and re-gauging our goals and changing things as life changes with us. All right, so I have a couple minutes. I'd love to know in the chat, give me some feedback. What would you say are going to be your next steps for you? We've learned about what work-life balance is, the fact that it's not 50-50 anymore. We learned about what burnout is. I shared some really great tips. What would you say are your next steps after this session? And I love asking this question at the end. You can start to type in the chat. I love asking this question because when I do a workshop and we do an experience, I love sharing resources and tools and tips. But what really matters is that action plan and the goals you have at the end of this session. So once we press end on this call and you go back into your roles, that's what's mainly important about what you're going to do for yourself and what your next steps are. So I see a couple here. Remembering my hobbies. Sharing the experience of this workshop with my team. Yes, absolutely. Taking a lunch break and incorporating a walk. Yes, even though it sounds like very small things, it really isn't. They aren't small things at all. They could be really impactful to our work-life balance, to our mental health, and for us to go back to feeling like really great leaders again. I know a lot of us have not been feeling that in a long time. I think a lot of it has to do with just going back to finding balance. We've been completely off balance for quite some time, even before COVID. Then COVID came and totally slapped us over and brought us off balance again. But now it's about bringing us back and finding that balance. These are great. Taking time for yourself, taking walks now that the weather is better, remembering what fills my cup. Absolutely. These are really, really, really great. All right, so I'm actually going to share that video later. And then we have, okay, we're gonna move on from there. I noticed the time. I'm seeing a lot more things. Let me actually read a couple more of these. Yes, COVID threw everyone off. Figuring out how to work some of these principles into my next CPL planning cycle so it's concrete. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so thank you so much, Kangaroo Time, for having me. We are pretty much done. This was really great. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful engagement, and know that you deserve balance as a leader. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anisha. Yeah, I could have kept listening to you all day. These are great tips. I definitely need to download that workbook. And thank you guys for chatting so much in the chat. That has really helped just to hear everyone else's experience too. And yes, I will send this recording tomorrow, so you can definitely share it out with your team. I'll include the workbook in there and all of Anisha's contact information. And then I can ask Anisha if she'll share the PowerPoint if that's an option. But stay tuned tomorrow for that email. And thank you again, Anisha. It was a pleasure having you. This was such great content. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.